India celebrates its 79th Independence Day, a time when there's a lot of national fervor. Interestingly, the news tells me there is also a controversy about the history books. Again, there is a controversy about the history books and the way it's portrayed. I'm not going to get into the debate of what the debate is, but it is about the independence struggle, the portrayal, how one party has an issue, and how history is presented to the young minds. Now, why is it that it's only the history books that come up in politicians' mind? Have you ever seen a parliamentary debate on a math book or a math concept or even science, unless it's ethical matter? But have you seen politicians fighting over a laws of physics or mathematical formulae? But the portrayal of history apparently has direct bearing on the kind of perspective that people hold about how a particular political group is aligned to a piece or a slice of history. So, how history is portrayed, it affects politicians, affects people, affects masses, affects the groups of people, affects a whole paradigm of thought. Why? Why is it that people can't be objective about history the way they can be about math? Interesting, worth thinking about, valuable, almost priceless, I'd say. See, the way history is taught in schools today, anywhere, I think, definitely so in India, almost everything is served on a platter for you. You are given a perspective, and the child is supposed to just take it in. There's no critical thinking. There's definitely no critical thinking involved directly. Any critical thinking that might be applied has nothing to do with the education system. The education system doesn't really teach you how to think critically. Okay? But nevertheless, the human mind has its own life, it has its own gifts. So you do end up thinking critically in spite of what the education system is. So the kid might ask a couple of questions, but history, if the way in which history is taught, if that could be changed, if instead of giving on a platter, instead of saying, this guy Jinnah said this, Gandhi said this, Hitler said this, somebody else said that, instead of quoting and then giving a portrayal, this king was a great king, that king was a cruel king. Now, of course, there are reasons for it. There's a reason why that perspective has come up. Why do you think somebody is a cruel king? Because there's a whole lot of history behind it. But interestingly, when the same king or same leader is shown or depicted by another group who holds opposite thoughts, he's raised to a pedestal. Why is this so? Because of vested interest, perhaps? Because of the whole notion of identity, perhaps? Why is it the depiction of, the past is past, the king is gone, how does it matter how it was? We've got to live in the present. But no, the whole notion of identity comes up. Who are you related to in the past? Now that makes a difference. And that means you're carrying a legacy through history, whether you know it or not, like it or not. That's why people in political games try to say, oh, I belong from so and so race. In fact, if we didn't have history, where would our sense of identity come from? And I would like to ask here, do we really need a sense of identity derived from history? That's a quite $1 million question. Not going to take it up right now. But coming back to why history books matter to politicians and parliamentary debates more than mathematical books is because of the way history is taught. Why can't we just give the sources and not emphasize and not give the deduction? Why is it that the child can't deduce or infer from the list of things? I know it's hard, but at least we should give the conflicting viewpoints. Okay, what do you quote? What do you leave out? What do you give? What do you hide? Well, forget hide, you just don't highlight it so it gets neglected anyway. Now, if history is taught, that a young mind is taught to reconstruct the past and infer from their own journey, you'd find that a lot of these debates would dim. There would be multiple voices. But do people in power really want multiple voices, or do they want one kind of perspective to go now? Now that's worth thinking about. And how do they keep on bulldozing? How is it that minds are brainwashed? Now, there are some people, if you tell them that, look, this is about your past, they will be up in arms. You will have blood spilling. You will have wars. They'll fly at your throat, but they won't listen. They won't be able, because it's hard to answer something that is rationally supported. So you don't give a very rational kind of viewpoint which is supported through data. Okay, and when you want to brainwash people, you will only give certain data. You will not give the other. For example, I could say the earth is really big. Of course, the earth is big. Look, who's the standard? We are. We are really tiny beings. And when we look at that, the earth is really big. What happens when you put the earth in perspective with, let's say, Jupiter? Okay, the sun, the galaxies. And then where does our earth, with the millions and millions of galaxies and Milky Way, where does our earth stand and where do we stand? And that is perspective. In history, when we simply give notions, and I'm really tempted to open my mobile and read out the recent couple of extracts from partition modules over which the most recent controversy has arisen. It's really interesting. It's saying the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan were by no means inevitable. Jinnah demanded it, the Congress accepted it, Mountbatten formalized and implemented it. That's why people are up in arms. They're saying, how can you? The Congress is up in arms. Well, they've got their own reasons for that. Look at the few other quotes. Either a divided India or a destroyed India. They're quoting Jinnah. Jinnah's warning that the module says forced Congress leaders Nehru and Patel to concede. And then there's one more quote after that. I never thought it would happen. I had never expected to see Pakistan in my lifetime. Jinnah's later admission as cited. Now there are more quotes, there are more extracts. You can go. This is just an example. You will find that when a leader is portrayed or a group is portrayed, suppose something is said about a race or a religion, sweeping statements without support or without the opposite viewpoint is given, there will be controversies. But if history textbooks were written saying this is what one kind of history report is and this is another kind of history report, these are all the facts. Of course, it will take, I understand that this will become almost impossible to teach, because then all the time students will be sifting. You want to simplify, so you just give the notions, give the historical fact perspective. But a child needs to understand how these perspectives are formed, how these inferences are made, and how are these statements given. If the how is not given, no matter what is said, it doesn't help real education, doesn't help the mind of the child. I don't think it's going to help politicians beyond a point. Of course, everybody wants to whitewash. Now another party will come into power, then they will take this down and then they would install some other perspective. So this is how the power games work. Depending on who's on power, names change, history books change, institutional directives change, and then another group comes into power and then the whole wave sweeps, and that's how it works. If critical thinking were a part and parcel of education, no matter who was in power, then we would have a very different kind of a world. Because whoever gave their perspective, people would ask why, how. Education must teach the child to ask the why, how, where, and if they don't do that, then we are filling the mind with some kind of perspective, one sided, sweeping, brainwashing. We don't have to wash the brain with a one kind of color. We have to awaken the child's brain so that they can see all the colors and then come to their own conclusion. Now, I understand it's a tall order, but हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन.